Hello, Grace Community Church. Today is May 10, and we're continuing our journey cover to cover, going through the Bible, and we're in the book of Psalms. And today we're looking at 4 Psalms of David, 35, 36, 37, and 38. Each one of these Psalms has a different personality, and all of them really are special in their own right. We sometimes try to figure out where a psalm is written in David's life, and sometimes we're able to figure that out, sometimes we are not. And this is an example of we don't really have a lot of data, except one of the Psalms mentions that he is now old. So in all likelihood, that psalm was written towards the latter part of his life. Psalm 35 mentions something which I think is worth noting. He talks about worshiping God with every bone in his body. That intrigues me. When was the last time we worshiped God with every bone in our body? And when we look at these Psalms and understanding that David had a heart for God, that is what God valued in him, when I see things like that, and I realize I want to reflect the very things that David had, that God valued. I also see that David is very honest with God. He says, "How long, Lord, will you do nothing?" That's a very frank prayer to God. Does God strike him with a thunderbolt, lightning bolt? No, he doesn't. He hears it. And David has this intimacy with God where he feels safe that he can tell God those very things. Well, moving on to Psalm 36, he mentions this interesting phrase right at the beginning, that sin whispers. Sin whispers. And we probably have all sensed from time to time the whisper of sin in our heart and mind. But he also balances this by saying, your unfailing love is as vast as the heavens. Now, this psalm is one that I have to say I probably quote part of it to myself every week. So behind me on the screen you can see a mountain. That's Mount Charleston. And I think of these words from the psalm: your steadfast love extends to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the clouds. Your righteousness is like majestic mountains, and your wisdom like the depths of the sea. Whenever I walk out of my house and I turn to the right and I see Mount Charleston, which as of today still has snow on the top of it. Here, as it's 100 degrees in the valley, on the mountain, there's still snow. It reminds me of who God is, and his righteousness is like majestic mountains. Psalms like this are wonderful to reflect on when we consider the beauty of nature, particularly in our own area. When we move to chapter 37 or Psalm 37, David says this: delight in the Lord. And here's the promise: delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. But before we go jumping in, I want to delight in God and get a new car, it's that my ideas and my thoughts start bending and connecting with God's thoughts. But it's still a promise. As our thoughts are aligned with his thoughts, as we delight ourselves in the Lord, he indeed knows what we know, what we love, what we want, and he wants to satisfy those things. He goes on with this piece of word: be still in God's presence. And a piece of observation. This is the psalm where he says, I've become an old man. I have never seen the godly people abandoned. What this particular psalm is, by scholars, is a wisdom psalm. In other words, it would almost feel at home in the book of Proverbs. It's giving wise principles to live by. Delight yourself in the Lord. Be still in his presence. And understand that if you pursue godliness, you will never find yourself abandoned by God. Good principles. Our last psalm that wraps this up is one that we could say David certainly needed, and that is, it's called a penitential psalm, or a psalm of asking God to forgive us. David is the sinner, and he ends this psalm with saying, "The Lord is my Savior." I will never forget seeing the movie Amazing Grace. It's about the life of William Wilberforce. If you have not seen the movie, I highly recommend it. Again, it's called Amazing Grace. But in the movie, William Wilberforce is with a contemporary, somebody you have known of, John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace. And I remember at this point in the movie, John Newton says these words, "I am a great sinner." He was a slave trader before he wrote that hymn. But then he finishes the sentence, "And my Jesus is a great Savior." That is what David has discovered about God. He is, David, a sinner, but God is a Savior. Hey, we'll see you tomorrow as we continue our journey cover to cover through the Bible. God bless you.